How you all doing, everybody? It's me, Crazyfrankie, and I'd like to welcome you to my Week 9 4 key game picks. Before we get into week number 9, what can I say of what happened in week number 8? And I'm pretty sure that everybody's still talking about this, and you know what I'm going through, including myself. I could not believe with my own eyes what I just saw late Sunday afternoon. Was the Hail Mary game winner from Jaden Daniels to Noah Brown on the last play of the game. I tell you. At first, I didn't think that Jaden Daniels was going to play Sunday because of the fact he injured his ribs. And this guy's a baller. You have to give this guy some sort of bravery and credit. The guy played on Sunday with a rib injury, and somehow the Commanders escaped with a big win over the Chicago Bears, which really was a bit of a letdown because it wasn't really a high-scoring affair, which I thought this game could have been if with both number one picks for each for their respective teams in Caleb Williams and Josh McDaniels. But obviously, the storyline was really that Hail Mary pass that Jaden Daniels threw, that Noah Brown thankfully was there to catch the ball. Bears cornerback Tyree Stevenson seriously taking a lot of heat, as he should. Anybody who's watched so many videos from different perspectives of what happened in that Hail Mary pass, he deserves the heat because he was taunting the fans before the play started. And then when the plays did start, he barely got back to where he was supposed to be, and he was the one that deflected the ball instead of knocking it down, causing the ball to go backward, and Brown was lucky to be right there to catch the ball. Now, if he would have knocked it down, he would have escaped any sort of heat. But let's be real. It was not only just that. I mean, the Bears had plenty of things that really a lot of things were inexcusable. They did a terrible job on the final seconds of that game. They did not prevent Washington from getting further and closer to the end zone, which they should have. Their prevent defense was bad. Let's be real. I'm trying to remember what the word was, but yeah. Obviously, I mean, that was basically the story of what happened in week number 8. But when you look at what else happened in week number 8, the Chiefs are still undefeated. Well, that's because the Raiders are terrible, but it was a game. The Chiefs only won by a touchdown. But now you got to wonder now, are some teams starting to figure out the Chiefs' flaws? Obviously, they got Hopkins from Tennessee from a trade. And obviously, the Chiefs' injuries are kind of still piling up. They're still waiting for Pacheco to come back. Who knows? I mean, they're fortunate enough that Kareem Hunt is back with them. Remember, he used to play with the Chiefs before there was some off-the-field issues with him. And now that he's back, he's really helped the Chiefs' running game until Pacheco gets back. And you look at some other headlines of what happened in week number 8. The Lions destroyed the Titans, but there are some question marks regarding their defense, even though they won big. But there's some question marks regarding their defense, and there are legitimate questions because the big game coming up against the Packers for first place at stake in the division is coming up, and it is going to be one of the key games I will talk about later in this video. Eagles are starting to look like their old selves, but I don't know if that's going to last because, they're starting to get a bit cocky, and Nick Sirianni really is just pushing it. And I understand Eagles fans' frustrations and the way he's acting like almost a complete jerk, to be honest. And I could totally get what Eagles fans are feeling right now. How about the Ravens losing to the Browns of all teams? Now you start to wonder, is there something going on with the Ravens that we did not, that nobody's talking about? I mean, their defense really let them down in that game. That's also inexcusable for the Ravens to lose to really the Browns, that are really a terrible team. But give Jameis Winston some credit. He really stepped it up, and the Browns did win. 49ers barely beating the Cowboys. I mean, they had total control of that game against the Cowboys, but the Cowboys almost came back. But obviously, San Francisco defense finally stepped it up. But still, they got a lot of work to do to really catch up, to try to at least get a playoff spot, or hopefully try to get back to the division because the NFC West is still wide open. And of course, the Steelers and Russell Wilson, they barely escaped the victory over the Giants, but they really dominated that game, so it really wasn't much of a surprise for me. Anyways, let's get into week number 9. All right, week 9 schedule is a little bit kind of hard for me to pick 4 key games because a lot of these games look a bit predictable. So it's going to be a little bit different this week. I mean, there's some other games I probably missed that maybe should get more attention. But obviously, these are the games that will get some attention this week. All right, let's begin with key game number 1. It is the Denver Broncos versus the Ravens. Now, the only reason why I'm saying this is a key game because of the fact that Denver is in second place in the AFC West, and they got a good record, despite the fact that they have a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix that's really leading the charge. Now, Bo Nix was 28 of 37, 240 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, but keep in mind, they were playing a Panthers team that's absolutely horrific. And Lamar Jackson for the Ravens was 23 of 38, 289 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions, though, but in a bad loss against the Browns. The Ravens are a 9-point favorite in this one here, and I would say that's about right. But the question marks are going to be, will Baltimore's defense respond? If there's ever a football game that the Ravens defense needs to send a message to the rest of the league, because to me it looked like the Ravens could be the team, even though they already played the Chiefs in week 1, they still could be an essential threat in the playoffs to knock them out, to finally stop, to maybe one of the teams to stop the three-peat. But now you got to wonder with that Ravens defense. If there was a wake-up call for the Ravens in this, what happened against the Browns, hopefully that is the wake-up call. Because in all honesty, look, I'm going to make this pick very quick because I think the Ravens are going to beat the Broncos, and I'm going to pick the Ravens. Look, the Broncos, they're starting this. Look, Bo Nix and Sean Payton starting to get the offense going here, but the Broncos defense isn't all that great. The Broncos have been fortunate enough to get an over 500 record, but they're going to hit a brick wall in this game. One of my 4 key game picks, obviously, because the Broncos have a good record, and they're playing they're playing the Ravens, and the Broncos could make this a football game, but let's be real, the Ravens are the much better team in this one here. I'm going to pick the Ravens here. I think the Ravens, hopefully this was a wake-up call for them, and they will, I expect the Ravens to kind of blow out the Broncos, but it wouldn't surprise me if they end up being a close game. And if that does happen, there's some big issues going on with the Ravens. I know they're dealing with some injuries right now, but the Ravens got to send a message that they're not out of it. They're still a threat. And I'm going to pick the Ravens over the Broncos. The Ravens at -9, so Ravens over the Broncos. Key game number 2, it is the Buccaneers versus the Chiefs. Chiefs are an 8.5-point favorite. That's about right. This should be a quick pick too. So I'm looking at it the way I'm seeing this right now. 2 games that are kind of guaranteed picks, and 2 games that are going to be a 50-50 toss-up. But talking about this game, Mayfield last week was 37 of 50, 330 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, in a bad loss against the Falcons. Now, Mahomes was 27 of 38, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, in a big victory against the Raiders. The Buccaneers are really missing a lot in their offense. Evans, is going to be out. Obviously, the Buccaneers have a lot to have to figure out who their go-to people are, and Baker Mayfield did a lot last week to try to keep them in the game last week against the Falcons, and they almost came back, but without any key offensive weaponry for the Buccaneers, I like the Chiefs in this game, and I'm going to pick the Chiefs. Even though, despite the fact the Chiefs don't look like a team that could three-peat, especially given that there is, but let's be real, Spagnuolo's defense, give Spagnuolo a ton of credit with what he's done with that Kansas City defense. They shut offenses down. Now, I know they got into a little bit of a game with the Raiders, but let's be real. The Buccaneers, without any sort of offensive weaponry and all that, Spagnuolo is really going to put Baker Mayfield on the ground, and the way given what their defense is right now. This is another quick pick here. I'm picking the Chiefs at -8.5. They'll beat the Buccaneers here. I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a game too, but the Chiefs are just much better offensively, and they will beat the Buccaneers in this one here. It is the Chiefs at -8.5. Key game number 3. Now we get into games that are 50-50 toss-ups. And this is kind of a big one in the NFC West, to be honest with you. It is the Rams versus the Seahawks. I was looking at some odds makers, and they're going back and forth on which team should be favored in this one here, but only by 1 point. Some have the Rams as a 1-point favorite. Some have the Seahawks as a 1-point favorite. For all intents and purposes for this one here, it's you pick 'em status in this game, to be honest. There's really no favorite in this one here, as both teams, they're really evenly matched here. Now, Stafford was 25 of 34, 279 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception in an upset victory last week over the Vikings. Now, the Seahawks, Geno Smith was 21 of 29, 212 yards, and 1 interception, but no touchdowns. They got destroyed by the Bills last week, and there are some huge question marks going into this game for the Seahawks here. Obviously, they really were missing Metcalf. Their offense really has struggled big time. And defense-wise, they just had a hard time stopping Josh Allen, but they were able to pick off Josh Allen, giving him his first interception of the year. But now you're going up against a divisional opponent, and the Rams with Cooper Kupp and Nakua back at full strength, you got to give a slight edge to the Rams here, to be kind of honest with you. Now, but here's the thing, though. The Rams really struggle on the road in Seattle. I mean, it's been a long time since the Rams had a victory in Seattle. Last year they did have a victory over them in the first week of the season. But their track record really isn't that great in Seattle, to be quite honest with you. Even though they did have a big playoff win in 2005. Or was it 2004? I think it was 2004, to be honest. But I look at this game here. Obviously, I give the slight edge to the Rams because they got Cooper Kupp and Nakua back. So this really should be I'm giving a slight edge to the Rams, and I'm going to pick the Rams here. There's really no clear-cut favorite in this one here. If the Rams do win, they probably will be in a first-place tie with the Cardinals because the Cardinals and the Bears, it depends on what happens in the Cardinals and the Bears because the Cardinals do have the Bears. Right now, the Cardinals are currently in first place, and they do have the tiebreaker over the Rams. So the Rams can do is just be in a first-place tie with them. Obviously, it's just basically who has a better edge in the NFC West. So obviously, it just depends on what happens in this football game because really the NFC West is becoming wide open, and it's hard to say who's gonna. There's really no clear-cut favorite right now in the division, but it's obviously who will have an upper edge in this one here because the Cardinals are playing the Bears, and if the Cardinals do beat the Bears, the Cardinals will have first place, and the Rams would be in second. But for all intents and purposes, I like the Rams in this one here. It's going to be a close game for sure, but I'm giving a slight edge to the Rams here. I think the Rams will beat the Seahawks. And finally, key game number 4, it's the big one in the NFC North. It is the Lions versus the Packers. The Lions are a slight 3.5-point favorite, and I expect that number to be much lower. Probably 3, maybe 2.5. Jared Goff, 12 of 15, 85 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Now, those stats were kind of interesting because, let's be real, special teams were big against the Titans. And that should be a clear-cut message to the Green Bay Packers. They better watch out for that Lions special teams because they really have some playmakers that could turn any game around. Now, Jordan Love was hurt last week with a groin injury against the Jaguars. So, obviously, Malik Williams finished that game. He was 4 of 5, 56 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interception. And he's become kind of a little bit of a secret weapon. And obviously, most of it, you got to give a lot of credit to Josh Jacobs and that running game that the Packers have is basically pounding football. This is a big-time 50-50 toss-up. This game could go either way because the Packers do have defense themselves. And I have a lot of questions on the Lions defense. Now, they had some more injuries in terms of defense. Now they're getting stretched thin. And they barely rushed the quarterback. They barely rushed to get to Rudolph of the Titans, and there's some big-time question marks on that Lions defense too, especially Jordan Love and Willis can be mobile, and they could torch that defense if they don't find a way to get to him. This is going to be a dogfight in this game, especially the Lions are on the road at Lambeau, and the Lions' track record, even though they did beat them 2 years in a row, but this is a game where really the Packers will be in this one here. This game could be a shootout, even though we don't know of the status of Jordan Love if he is going to play. Obviously, the damage was limited. So it wouldn't surprise me if Jordan Love wants to play in this game. So it's really hard to say if Jordan Love or Malik Williams is going to start in this game. But they're both are mobile and can make some plays. And that's going to be trouble for the Lions. But if the Packers get into a shootout with the Lions have the better offense. Let's be real. They got the running game. And anybody in terms of catching passes from Jared Goff can make plays themselves. You got Ahmad St. Brown. You have Sam Laporta. Jamal Williams will not be playing in this game. Obviously, he's dealing with a 2-game suspension. So it's going to be really interesting to see now if Jared Goff can get that offense going and see who will be his biggest playmakers. Who do I have winning this game? This game's a 50-50 toss-up. You could go either way in this game. But I'm leaning towards the Lions. I think the Lions have the better offense. But it's going to be a back and forth and fair. This game's going to be a shootout for sure. So it's going to be a big-time, great football game in Lambeau late Sunday afternoon in Lambeau. So it should be a good one here. Obviously, first place is at stake here for the division, for who might have the first punch and who gets the first place advantage going into Week 10. But I think the Lions, they have the better offense. I like the Lions in this one here at -3.5. I'm going to pick the Lions here. It's going to be a close game. But I think the Lions will barely beat the Packers here. I'm going to pick the Lions over the Packers. All right, everybody, that wraps up my picks for week number 9. Please check the description below for all my week 9 picks. And I'll talk to you guys next week when I make my picks for week number 10. Take care and enjoy your football weekend.